Gail Lambert. I live in Gainesville, Florida, and I'm going to read an excerpt from a personal essay that is part of this latest book of mine, My Withered Legs and Other Essays, published by the University of Georgia Press. So, here we go. Crip humor. The patrol car barrels through the stop sign and pulls to a halt. I let my wheelchair slow, and the little dog matches my pace and then sits beside me as we come up alongside. The officer rolls down his window. Our hands are at the same level and close to each other, as are our heads. My neighbors around the corner, where this patrol car came from, have a cop for a son. He visits sometimes, and I figure this is him. He says, "I could give you a ticket." For many reasons, I get to laugh. Not a snicker, but a belly guffaw, mouth wide open, that possibly sends spittle into his vehicle. I also laugh because I think he's joking. 1,152 people, I did the math, an average of 3 times a month in the 32 years since I started using a wheelchair, have yelled at me that I'm going to get a ticket as I go by them in my wheelchair. I've been told, and I've sometimes said to myself, that there's no harm meant, that although tedious, these responses could be taken as a sort of encouragement or admiration. Let me pause the story here to argue with my own self. There is harm meant. First of all, men, is it required I say not all men, not only men, are yelling at a woman they don't know? Unless warning of an oncoming golf cart, a post-thunderstorm downed live wire, or a cottonmouth on the path, actual Florida incidents, the yelling itself is a hostile act. But what are they mad about? Perhaps they believe disabled people should never be fast, agile, graceful, competent, or seem as if they're having loads of fun. Me negotiating a sidewalk without hesitation with grocery bags hanging and swinging behind me with one hand on a joystick and an arm wrapped around a bouquet with the flowers tickling my chin annoys them. These men are tiresome. But I don't care because I am fast, agile, graceful, competent, and having a really good time. Especially when I have little dogs striding along beside me, ears back and tail bouncing. But the police officer in his patrol car must be friends with someone who uses a wheelchair and knows how funny he's being. He's to be lauded for taking the joke that I think we are enjoying in common to new heights, what with him actually being able to give tickets. After all these long years, he's the first to raise the cliche to the meta level, and I'm showing my appreciation with a long and loud laugh. But the young officer turns face forward, his jaw bulges, and I am close enough to see the pounding beat of a blood vein vessel in his neck. Here's a man in uniform who is angered by my disrespect. He turns his face back to mine and proclaims that he saw me run that stoplight with his own eyes. He says I'm in trouble. He keeps saying angry things, and now the spittle is coming my way. I stop laughing, but I'm still smiling, because this is even funnier than what I thought, and because my body believes in the protective cloak of disabled old lady whiteness. Okay, I'm going to end the essay there because I'm coming up on my 5 minutes allowed. But to read more of it, here you go, My Withered Legs and Other Essays. I hope you enjoy, and I'll be there at the conference, and I hope to see you then. Bye.
Morgan Adams, and today I will be reading from my debut novel, View from the Top. As a little background, Lizzie Taylor has just graduated from law school, and she started working at her first job at one of Manhattan's most elite law firms. She meets Darcy Hammond, the managing partner, during orientation, and instantly sparks fly. Lizzie thinks Darcy is picking up what she's putting down, but she's been keeping Lizzie at a distance. When Darcy shows up at a firm-sponsored happy hour, Lizzie sees her chance to find out if Darcy's feeling the electricity between them, or if she's about to risk her very new career over a hot older woman. Oh well, what's life without a little risk, right? Know thyself was one of Lizzie's favorite quotes. So when she knew she was on her way to being drunk at the firm happy hour, she really knew it. The Ainsworth was just a few blocks away from Byron and Browning and had served as the unofficial firm bar for over 5 years. It was crowded, and at least half of the people in it were B&B associates. Out of the corner of her eye, Lizzie saw something unexpected. A flash of brunette hair pulled back into a flawless French twist. She could only see the back of the woman's head, but the streaks of silver and pulled back shoulders confirmed what she already knew. Darcy Hammond was here. She watched as Darcy crossed the room to a seat at the end of the bar. Lizzie took note of the charcoal gray suit and how it hugged every curve of Darcy's body as if it had been made for her. Heck, maybe it was. Hidden behind Jackson's shoulder, Lizzie stared for a few seconds as Darcy adjusted her watch, then pulled out her phone and checked it before setting it face down on the bar. She ordered a drink, and Lizzie watched the bartender as he began to mix it. Once the bartender delivered the drink, Darcy took a large gulp. She grimaced slightly, and Lizzie smiled at the brief moment of weakness from the woman of steel. Lizzie took another sip of her own drink and felt her nerve beginning to come back. She was here, at a bar. They weren't at work. In fact, they were at an event designed for small talk and socializing. It was totally fine if she went over and just talked to her, right? As Lizzie walked through the crowd, she kept her eyes on Darcy, who continued to stare at her phone. When she finally reached the end of the long bar, she slid into a small space to the left of Darcy and smiled. Hi. Darcy looked up briefly but didn't make eye contact. Hi, she replied casually, returning her attention to her phone. You know, it's bad for your eyes to stare at a screen in the dark like this. Darcy smiled, finally looking in her direction. When she did, Lizzie realized just how little space there was between them. Darcy's nose was inches from her face, and she felt her breath being sucked out of her lungs. You are very outspoken for someone so young. Do you know that? Lizzie nodded. Believe it or not, I have heard that before. You don't say, Darcy replied. I'm surprised to see a New Yorker drinking a mint julep, although I have to say the bartender totally fucked it up. Oops. Was she allowed to drop the F-bomb on her boss like that? Lizzie's heart sank slightly. Sorry. For what, saying fuck? Darcy shook her head. Relax, I'm not your mother. Though I am curious as to how the bartender fucked up my order you seem to know so much about. Lizzie swallowed hard and kept her confidence. It's all about the ice. Well, the ice and the cup, Lizzie said, touching Darcy's glass. She traced the bead of sweat dripping down the side. Her fingers touched Darcy's just barely. You see, a proper mint julep has crushed ice and is in a silver cup, and it should be piled on top like a snow cone. Without permission, Lizzie took a sip, feeling the sweet, warm bourbon trickle down her throat. It was the final boost of courage she needed. Darcy raised an eyebrow, seemingly intrigued by Lizzie's blind confidence. How did you know what drink I ordered? I watched the bartender make it. Darcy smiled and shook her head. Lizzie shuffled a little closer. Their legs were entirely touching now, barely an inch between them, and the only thing Lizzie could smell was Darcy's perfume and the faint trace of bourbon. I could teach you something a little more complex than a basic mint julep if you're interested, Lizzie said brazenly. Easy, tiger, Darcy said. Don't bite off more than you can chew. She winked as she finished her sentence, and it was enough to send Lizzie over the edge. Lizzie leaned closer, the rush of bourbon coursing through her veins. She pressed her lips almost on Darcy's ear as she whispered, Do you want to get out of here? Thank you, everyone.
My name is Silk Jasmine. I am a local author here in the Tampa-St. Pete area, and today I'm going to read a bit of my short story called Lay Me Down to Sleep that was published in Midnight and Indigo's speculative copy in their speculative edition. I was really excited about this, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump into this. Paddock Grimes, like everyone else, knows Winifred Yates is going to die today. Death typically sneaks up on people, swoops them up before they know what's happening. Sometimes it walks regularly, and to those who are waiting, hearing its footsteps, they feel its icy fingertips but don't know its exact time of arrival. She does. Her execution date and time was announced over 2 weeks ago. He smells like sugar and tobacco. His hat rests low on his head, covering his eyebrows. His black uniform is pressed, the creases bulging from his pants. Black boots shine like the belt around his waist, which holds his taser and baton. He hasn't had to use either on Winifred, though she's been labeled extremely dangerous. Paddock knew her before all of this, before the sentencing, before the tribunal, before she slit the throat of the man who raped her daughter, Aurora. Winifred was holding a knife when her neighbor Magor and his son Alan broke into their home. A week before, he'd been drunkenly talking about how she'd grown up nice and he was going to be her first and he never wanted a woman so badly. There's a plate of fish, broccoli, and rice sitting with a glass of red wine on the tray protruding from the bars. It looks exactly the same as when they delivered it 12 hours ago, minus the steam. The roll is dry and flaky. It won't be long before mold consumes it and the bugs begin to salvage what they can. Winifred doesn't move as he puts the tray on the floor on his side of the bars. Paddock looks over each shoulder before stepping inside and pulling a biscuit out of his pocket and tossing it to her. She gives him a raised corner of her mouth. It's so fast anyone else would have thought it merely a twitch. Paddock knows it's her last, all she can give after giving so much. It's going to be televised, he tells her as she eats the biscuit, broadcasted in every school. She scratches her bald head. Her head was shaved the day before her tribunal. Paddock was standing in the courtroom. Alan was a star witness. His pimples looked as though they'd been poured on his face, dots all over his red, irritated skin. He was eager to give his testimony. Paddock watched the boy scoot to the edge of his seat, fist balls, knuckles white, sweat aggravating and highlighting his young acne. His voice a shrill squeak, resting at the cusp of puberty, his vocal cords trying to figure out what a man sounded like. The boy yelled his testimony, and no one asked him to lower his voice. His volume matched the look of disgust on the judge's face. The camera zoomed in as the boy called Winifred a monster and a threat to society. The lens captured him spitting while he talked. Saliva accumulated on the wooden bar before him. Sometimes he gripped it, digging in his dirty nails, and a few times he slammed his fists down into it. He regurgitated lessons learned in the school that girls weren't allowed to attend. Paddock was 10 when his own father explained how betrothal day worked. Marriage is made of one flesh from two people, he was told, but sometimes one of the people has to be convinced. Any male over the age of 16 could ravish any unmarried woman over the age of 12. Once ravished, the girl had to go home with him and was his wife from that moment on, and if a man chose not to engage, he couldn't get married. Paddock had been a part of many conversations around the bonfire. "I'm getting Sarah," one man would say. "Mary's looking nice this year," another. "With those hips and lips, I don't want anyone else." He only stayed to not bring attention to himself. He didn't ravish his wife. They secretly courted for months, and he made it clear during the bonfires that he wanted her. No one contested this, and on betrothal day, he took her to his bedroom, and they signed their wedding papers the next week. But this rarely happens. Usually girls are snatched on their way to or from school. Widows are helpless as their neighbors storm their houses for their daughters. Paddock and his wife don't have any children. 30 years of marriage and not one birth to show for it. Winifred extends her legs and wiggles her 9 toes. The nails are long and dirty. The longest toe on her left foot is missing. She stands up and turns around to face the wall so Paddock can cuff her. His hands are unsteady. "Drinking again?" she asks. "Just for today," he tells her, clicks the handcuffs around her bony wrist. The skin is raw and flaky. He allows Winifred to lean on him as they make their way out of the cell. His hair is graying, but his bicep is solid. "I hope not on my account," she says. She winces when her bare feet hit the concrete. Bumps rise all over her body. It screams at the difference of the dirt-floored cell. "Of course on your account," he tells her.
Hello, ReadOUT Festival. I am so excited to be here with you for this virtual reading. My name is Crystal A. Smith. I am a writer of poetry, speculative fiction, and women's fiction, all with queer characters, characters of color, and excitement and adventure sometimes. Today, I am going to read from my latest book, Sheila on the Mend. This is my first standalone novel, and I'm very proud of it. This book is about a woman who is just trying to get back to herself and give herself the things that she needs with the help of friends, family, and some new loves in her life. The alleyway between Serenity Boulevard and Sycamore Street was so narrow, Sheila thought she might have a panic attack. Clinging to Cy's arm while gripping the satchel with her laptop in it, she scooted along the wall and practically bumped into Cy when she stopped walking abruptly. "Why are we here, Cy? It smells like urine." Looking over her shoulder, Sheila felt like she was being watched. She observed Cy's calm, cool, collected demeanor and thought she'd either been here before or she was going to trade her for something illegal. "It's fine," Cy said casually. "And yes, we are most definitely being watched." Cy felt around the brick with her hands like she expected to find something there hidden among the mortar. "What are you doing? I don't A small slot in the wall, just large enough for someone to look out, opened up. Sheila gulped when two brown eyes appeared, looking from side to side. "What's the password of the day?" "Calamari," Cy said. She looked over her shoulder at Sheila and winked. The slot closed with a slap. There was a click, followed by a low buzz. Then what appeared to be a hinged storm drain grate popped open. It's dark at first, so step slowly. Cy opened the gate and guided Sheila down into the ground. After stepping down after Sheila, she closed the grate behind them. "Stay to the right." "What is this? You said you wanted to talk to Sonny." "Not like a Cold War spy, Cynthia." Sheila was whispering through tight, angry lips while trying to find her way in the dark. "Are we doing something illegal?" "No." Cy paused for a second. "Well, I don't think so." "Oh my God." Sheila's under-breath grumbling made Cy laugh. They were walking into a room that had more light than the entryway. There was used restaurant furniture stacked up in the corners, and an empty convenience store cooler sat unused against the wall. "What is this place?" Sheila stood as close to Cy as possible while scanning for rodents. They were in a tunnel beneath the city. 3 arches led to different corridors, and the sound of electricity hummed amid the sound of an industrial fan. It was steamy down there. Cy pulled out a little card with a map on it from her jacket. "I always get a little turned around down here." She drifted off, looking at the map. "To the right, this way." They walked about 300 feet, then turned again and stopped at a fireproof door. Cy did a special knock that sounded a lot like Rapper's Delight. The door opened a crack, and a man with blue cornrows and a goatee poked his head out. When he saw Cy, he opened the door a little wider so he could eyeball Sheila. A slick little side smile opened his face. "That's you right there, huh?" He was nodding and grinning by the time he'd given Sheila the once-over. "Come in. Close the door." Sheila wrapped her arms around her waist. When she breathed out, she saw her breath. Several computer monitors and stations lined the back wall next to a super hub wired into at least 10 machines. That explained the temperature, but Sheila still couldn't wrap her mind around this place or Sonny at first glance. He was wearing an open Hawaiian shirt over a plain white tee and blue jeans. He wore gold rings on all fingers of both hands. Sonny walked back over to the larger-than-life computer monitor and sat down at his desk. He hit 3 keys, and the monitor displayed an image of Cy and Sheila standing on the sidewalk in front of her house. Holy shit. Who is this guy? He's the best. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful time at the festival. Get lots of books, and thank you for supporting writers like me.
Elsie, and I'll be reading from my YA novel, Streamline. Streamline follows Loon, a video game streamer, as she tries to build a career online. A lot of people don't believe in her, though, because she is autistic. She ends up meeting a legendary girl gamer named Noct, who begins to unravel everything Loon knows about gaming, friendship, and love. My notifications light my PC screen. It could be one of my online gaming friends, or it could be Noct. She promised to be in touch. Trying to keep my hopes in check, I open the inbox. My breathing stills. It's her. Are you online? She writes. While I could stare at her message for the rest of the night, I need to respond. So I start typing. I'm here. I was just finishing breakfast. Breakfast? Is that the best I could come up with? Noct is probably rolling her eyes. Oh, I'm getting a late start today. What did you eat? She types. She's more down to earth than I thought she'd be. I'll follow her lead. PB&J, broccoli. That's quite the combo, she types. It's not like it was my idea, but I'm not going to start talking about Mom. What about you? I ask. My daily energy drink and a protein bar. I drink an energy drink every night too. Wow, Loon. Wow. Every gamer basically lives off energy drinks. And that exclamation point, if Noct wasn't already aware of my fangirl enthusiasm, she sure knows now. Maybe you'll get an energy drink sponsorship someday, she types. Subscriptions are one way to make a living off gaming, but if a streamer gets enough traction, companies will pay them to use their equipment, wear their clothes, and even drink their energy drinks. I'll have to cam up first, I type. You could cam up for our mission tomorrow. The webcam box sits on the floor. I could cam up tomorrow. Would be a great day to start something new. I'm not sure, I write. Maybe I'll wait till I have 1K subscriptions. Camming up will probably help you hit 1K subscriptions faster. That's true, but I don't know. I'm kind of shy, I guess. Have you ever cammed up online before? She asks. Never. It's kind of silly that I'm so nervous. I actually look a lot like my avatar. Do a trial run, Noct writes. Why not cam up with me? I have no idea what to say to that. Most likely, she's just kidding. I decide to copy what a gaming friend of mine says in these situations. What will I get in return? Name the price, she writes. I laugh out loud. The idea that my face is worth a price is completely ridiculous. It dawns on me that Noct could be a predator on her side of the screen. Then again, if I'm planning to cam up for a live stream audience someday, creepers will be flooding my chat room more often. On the other hand, Noct might just be teasing me. So I'll tease her right back. Your voice, I write. My voice? You mean you want me to talk to you? Exactly. I'll cam up if you mic up. No one online has ever heard Noct speak. No one has seen my face. It's an even trade, but there's no way that the mysterious Noct would give in to a request like that. For whatever reason, she's kept her identity a total secret. Her silence goes on for so long that I start worrying that I've offended her. Then her reply comes crashing into the chat. Deal, she writes. Do you have hey there? We can call each other that way. Of course I have hey there. Yeah, I type. My username is Luniverse. Just give me a second. Cool. I'm Noct Rains. I wheel so hard to my vanity that I nearly crash. There's no way I'll cam up for Noct without a makeup touch-up. Thankfully, I'm wearing my favorite off-the-shoulder shirt. My reflection peers back at me. I feel pretty. Hopefully, I actually look pretty. My phone vibrates in my palm. One deep breath later, I press the green accept call button. There I am. The same image I see in the mirror every day. Noct's half of the screen is filled with a picture of her avatar. It's Loon, I say. The tremble in my voice only makes me more anxious. Hi, Loon. I freeze. While I didn't know what to expect, I never imagined this.
scent of lilac wafted past, attached to a woman Alice spotted on the trackway. The clack of her heels as they landed on the boardwalk hypnotized her, and she could only stand and watch this woman walk to the final tent. It took the shine of a bracelet that the woman wore to pull Alice from her stupor. She noticed the handbag next. Was it really silk? Her heart skipped when the woman set the handbag at her feet before leaning over the counter to speak to the man working behind it. Alice glanced around. She would have to be quick. She couldn't keep the handbag. Dorothy surely would notice she hadn't come with one. No problem, she decided, walking along the opposite side of the trackway. Closer now, Alice knelt so the handbag was within arm's reach. She fiddled with the strap of her heel. Glancing up, she found the line of the woman's stocking. She followed it up her calf and let her gaze linger on the hem of her skirt. Focus, Alice. As the woman continued talking, she reached out for the handbag and grabbed it, then hurried toward the end of the trackway, just as a group of men passed. She fell in behind them, easily taken for part of their group. She pulled open the handbag. $1 was folded near the top. She pulled it out and shoved it down her blouse. The men took a right toward the Ferris wheel. Feeling pleased, she looked up, only to collide with a troop of college boys. They rushed over the trackway in 2 waves, the first running past her, through her more like, as they shouted for the second to catch up. One of them collided with her shoulder, and she dropped the handbag. Another rammed into her, pushing her forward. Well, pardon me, she shouted after them in a huff, hoping they could feel the glare she leveled at the back of their heads. She recovered the handbag, then realized how empty the trackway was. Her body grew hot as she felt somebody watching her. Turning, she realized that the woman and the man behind the stand were staring. The woman had a concerned line between her arched brows that framed a stunning pair of brown eyes. Alice considered running, but she would have to explain to Dorothy why she had a handbag. Her mind spun with options, all of which seemed ridiculous, and she cursed herself. Rule number 1, don't let the target see your face. Miss, are you all right? Alice leaned sideways, her body in a war with itself on which direction to go. Miss? Alice gripped the handbag, though she was certain the woman had to have noticed it. What was happening? She had done this 100 times. Rule number 2, never speak to the target. Alice replied, I'm fine, thank you. Damn it. You don't look fine. The woman turned to say something to the man, then stepped closer. Are you quite sure? Lilac hit her again, this time wrapped around the air in a breeze. The woman's light brown skin was touched with rouge on her prominent cheeks. She was beautiful, and Alice couldn't stop herself before she presented the handbag between them. Is this yours? The woman's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. She turned to the stand, looking at the spot where her handbag had been, then spun back to Alice. Oh, well, yes, how did you... I saw someone take it, Alice said quickly. Fella got scared, dropped it, and took off. The woman seemed to contemplate the story. Alice pulled herself up. Confidence was key in getting out of sticky situations. She'd already broken 2 rules. She needed to get away from this woman, who took back the handbag slowly. Well, I'm glad you were here, she smiled. You're sure you're fine? I'm here with friends, Alice managed to say. God, what was she doing? A warm spark reached out then from the woman's eyes, and Alice felt a deep, nearly forgotten longing spike near her ribs. Well, you may want to find them and have them escort you home. I'm afraid you look rather pale, Miss... Her voice trailed off. Alice realized she was waiting for her name. You're right, I ought to get home. The woman's bottom lip jutted in a small pout at not getting a name. She reached a hand out then, resting it on Alice's arm. You're certain you're all right? Lost. That was how she felt. Alice felt utterly lost. She'd never failed a job this grandly, not since she was too young to truly understand this profession and the rules that came with it. I'm fine, she said quietly, pulling her arm back. The woman smiled softly. Well, thank you again for returning this. She pressed a hand over her chest. I'm Jeanette, by the way. Alice stood, certain she seemed like a dunce, too dumbstruck by her own failure to form a response. Please take care of yourself, Jeanette added before she turned to go. Alice stood watching her. Her gaze landed on the way Jeanette's skirt clung to her hips. When Jeanette turned back, Alice blushed at being caught watching her. Jeanette only smiled and waved. Alice was floating now, adrift, confused by what had transpired. I gave back the handbag? She could have run, she could have tossed it beneath the trackway and said she saw someone else walk off with it. She could have done so many things. Anything except what was good, what was right. Jeanette disappeared into the crowd, but Alice only stood there, recalling Jeanette's brown eyes. She inhaled sharply, the lilac fading, already a memory. A crushing feeling hit her as she knew exactly why she'd done what she had, and that reason broke every rule in the book. Thank you.
I'm so proud black male raised with traditional Christian values, diagnosed with clinical depression, who also happens to be gay. But that's getting way ahead of this story. A story that began with a boy named Calvin who cured one of my worst earth-spinning hangovers with world-stopping caramel kisses. Our feelings heated to a boil, and affection overflowed and spilled down the confines of our friendship. Like the night I sat in a chair listening to the hum of liners Calvin used on my head, his big rough hands guided my face with minimal verbal direction. I reached in my wallet. "Your money's no good here." I kissed him on the cheek. "What was that about?" "Well, you said my money was no good, so I wanted to give you something." He stooped down and whispered, "I think I owe you some change." He gave me a change. He gave me his love that night. Time narrowed down to us and my conflicted emotions. Amidst the chorus singing of "Sweet Love," there was one loud off-key note. "This is a sin." A repeating refrain that left my body rigid in Calvin's arms that next morning. "Okay, look," he began. "I wanted to be with you since the first day I met you, and not just sexually. I mean, you make me feel good. Maybe there's a better way to say it, but that's how I feel." Feeling the need to atone for our expression of love, I went in search of the answers that I've always looked for at the church as I've been taught all my life. Pastor reminded us that God could do anything, imparting his true spirit into every true believer, enabling them to walk upright. The congregation bore witness with a resounding "Amen." How that same spirit would help the drunk to stop drinking. Amen. That same spirit would help the fornicator to stop fornicating. Amen. The homosexual from being perverse in God's eyes. Collective groans, moans, and general sounds of disgust filled the air, suffocating me. It is an abomination. Amen. These words continuously shred my soul, but send my mind to the feet of the Almighty, pleading with this same God to change me into something worthy of his love, something to be worthy of love by his saints, something worthy of loving myself. Trying to outrun the deadly depression, my mental and emotional defenses eroded to a paper-thin veneer. I prayed to God for the soundness of my mind. He brought to my remembrance the multitude of victories he had given me. My mind a bit clearer, I pulled out my cell phone and took the first of many steps towards taking my own happiness into my own hands. "Calvin, can I come over? Come over." Things got so good between us. Every moment a sensation of infinity, feeling that I've always been and would always be encompassed by love. We had been hopeless romantics, both certain of our status, but decided that as a couple, we should know. "We ran the test twice," Dr. Hansen said with eyes that attempted to soften the blow. "Okay," I heard myself say with an eerie calm. There was more conversation about my emotional welfare and my past experiences with chronic depression. Calvin wrapped his arms around me. The dam cracked, and the first tear flowed. Drowning in fear-filled tears, I pushed away from Calvin's chest, looked down and within, and reached out for the only help I had ever really known. "I come to you, the only wise, the only living God, all that I could ever need, asking for your forgiveness, thanking you and praising your name. I thank you for the gift of your name, the power in your name, the wisdom and the ability to call on your name. Jesus, I come to you because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." My prayers bypassed my mouth and flew from my heart right up to heaven. That first week was a mixture of confused emotions, steaming ahead on the proactive train, destination, some sense of normality, with Calvin acting as co-engineer when I allowed him to do so. Weeks became months. We saw each other less and less. The time apart built a new resolve, a new fortitude. The flood of tears receded. Finally, I cornered Calvin at home. "Can you please look at me?" I asked. "I have to leave out in a minute," he says, after a moment pregnant with silence. I try in vain to will him to face me. "Okay, I'm gonna leave then." I stood and heard the remote fall to the couch. He quickly, desperately grabbed my arm. Calvin looked up at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. "I just can't do this anymore." I was surprised to hear his voice crack over the sound of my own heart breaking. The sensation of infinity collapsed as our hands let go.
I'm Suzanne Lenore, author of Good Game, a contemporary romance that's coming out in March from Bold Strokes Books. The story is about Sam O'Brien, a video game player who has decided to go pro and joined a team that has a bad boy reputation as the first woman player. It's also about Lauren Johansson, marketing executive for the team, who's been tasked with changing Sam's look. This scene takes place in a vintage clothing store. Sam strolled along, thumbing a rack of leather jackets. Lauren followed, watching her. She wasn't the only one. 2 college-age girls followed Sam with their eyes. When she passed, they giggled and whispered to each other. When Lauren passed, they were still watching Sam. They didn't even notice her. That was a strange feeling. Lauren was used to all eyes being on her, whether she wanted them or not. She noticed the rainbow patches and the other signifiers of queer culture on the women's shoulder bags. If their reactions were anything to go by, Sam must have been lesbian catnip. Sam stopped and put on an ancient Easter bonnet, a bright pink bow wrapped around the brim. She turned to Lauren. "What do you think? Is it me?" Lauren took it off her head, hung it back on its hook. "We both know that hat should be burned." She tossed her head towards the girls they'd passed. "You've got some groupies." Sam looked over Lauren's shoulder. "I don't know them." Lauren took a chance to infer that she knew Sam was queer. "They want to know you." "Oh, yeah?" Sam looked again. "Which one should I ask out? The tall one or the one holding the Hello Kitty backpack?" Lauren sensed she was teasing her. "Definitely a Hello Kitty girl," Lauren replied, relieved that she'd been right. Sam was into women, or at least open to it. Mimi the stylist fought her way through the overflowing racks carrying an armload of clothing. "Ladies, I have found the holy grail of vintage treasures." Sam stepped out of the dressing room in the first outfit, a mini top, a long patterned overshirt, and oversized trousers. Mimi even found a pair of heavy black platform shoes that looked like Doc Martens on steroids. "Ah, the aughts. My best decade," Mimi said wistfully. Sam rolled her eyes. Mimi pushed her back into the dressing room. Lauren heard her say, "Try this, this, and this together." And she closed the curtain. This time, Sam stepped out in black cargo pants, a white undershirt, and a black short-sleeved shirt with 2 thick vertical gray stripes down the front, like a vintage bowling shirt. What Lauren saw were the corded muscles in Sam's forearms and the rounded bicep when she curled her arm. She wasn't big, but she was defined. Sam saw her looking and gave her a shy smile, one that said she'd caught her. "Now this is your vibe, honey," Mimi said. "Yes," Lauren agreed. She leaned against an old bookshelf and watched as Mimi paraded Sam out in more and more outrageous but somehow appropriate outfits. Parachute pants from the 80s, low-rise flared bell-bottoms from the 90s. "You want me to try this on?" Sam held a black wraparound dress from the dressing room. Mimi snatched it from her hands. "Heavens, no, that's not you." She stepped over to Lauren. Conspiratorially, she said, "Keep an eye on this for me. Original Diane von Furstenberg from the 70s. She placed her hands together as if in prayer. What a find. Lauren laid it on top of the bookshelf and promised to watch it for her. When she turned back to the dressing room, what she saw took her breath away. Sam was in black leather boots with several sets of buckles and vintage dark-washed jeans with some looseness to them, but not too baggy. A ripped scoop-neck concert t-shirt hung under a black leather racing jacket with a stand collar and several white stripes, one down the sleeve and one down the front. She looked like she'd stepped off the set of a racing movie, and it was working for her. Lauren snapped a photo with her phone. She wanted to keep this one for herself. "What do you think?" Sam asked. Lauren couldn't articulate what she thought, which was that she wanted to run her hands down the front of that jacket. "You look amazing." Enjoy the rest of ReadOUT 2025, and thanks for having me.
Hi everybody, I'm Meredith Dunn, French, and I'm coming to you today from Dayton, Ohio, where it is currently snowing. I wish I was in Gulfport. I'm going to be reading to you today from my book Whereabouts Unknown, a sapphic thriller that reads a whole lot like a police procedural. And so just to give you a little insight into what's happening, because I am starting with chapter 2, but the book follows, Whereabouts Unknown follows Dayton homicide detective Theodora Matson, who goes by Theo. And when the novel opens, she's in the prime of her life with a job and a woman she loves and her first child on the way. But Theo cannot let go of a local missing teen case that's growing colder by the minute. And so this reading begins when Theo and a rookie detective named Cody Michaels go on a routine follow-up to verify the whereabouts of a suspect named Henry Nera. And then things go from there. So this is from chapter 2. Gunfire exploded with a deafening roar inside the business office. Theo pulled the trigger just as the bullet nicked her bicep. The force of the shot knocked off her aim, and she missed her target, Henry Nera's shoulder. Theo recovered and returned fire, but it felt like she was watching it all frame by frame in a slow-motion film. She saw Cody from the corner of her eye, the rookie along with her just for the experience, fumbling with his own weapon. Another bullet screamed past her. It was time for this to end, for everyone's safety. Theo aimed for Nera's chest, pulled the trigger, and then launched herself towards Cody, knocking him to the ground. A sudden silence filled the office, save for the deafening ring in her ear. Theo heard her own ragged breath, in and out, in and out. The smell of gunpowder bit her nostrils and lungs. She rolled over, her body screaming with pain, and caught sight of Henry Nera. He was down with a gaping hole to his chest. "Cody!" Theo tried to stand up when the white-hot pain exploded in her lower right side. She covered her hip with her hands as blood seeped between her fingers. "Matson, can you hear me?" Cody had been calling out her name from what seemed like miles away. She was no longer inside her body, though, floating somewhere above, watching the scene unfold below. Cody yelled into his radio for backup, for anyone who could come, and Theo's ears pitched into a maddening scream. Moments later, Theo felt the weight of Cody's hands on her shoulders. He gently lifted her head to open her airway, leaning her neck against his thigh. Somewhere in the distance, as if she were listening through a long tube, Cody told her to take some deep breaths, that help was on the way. Theo tried to speak, but nothing came out except for gasps of air. She wanted to tell Cody to forget about her and to clear the scene. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. All she felt was pain and a warm sensation below her waist. Theo's eyelids grew heavy, way too heavy to hold them open, and she'd lived through enough of these crime scenes to know that whatever was going on with her was really bad. Bree, she thought with a grip of panic. Bree Adams, hands down, was one of the best paramedics in Dayton. And Theo knew Bree was on shift today. They'd left home together that morning for their respected shifts. Bree was also Theo's lover and pregnant with their first baby. Bree can't see me like this, Theo thought. The upcoming birth of their child had Theo simultaneously bursting with joy and filled with terror. She knew that all of this couldn't be good for the baby. A scream erupted from the open doorway. She soon followed the clamor of work boots, medical equipment, and a rolling gurney. A paramedic knelt at Theo's side while somebody else helped Cody to his feet and then out of the room. Medics worked fast at Theo's side. Tubes slid up her nose with a sudden blast of oxygen, and she felt the cold pressure of a needle in the bend of her arm. In seconds, the IV bag dripped fluid. Then suddenly, warm hands. They cradled the sides of Theo's head while the others worked to secure her to a backboard. "Theo, can you hear me? We're transferring you to a gurney." Theo tried to nod and open her eyes, but she didn't have the strength. "You'll be okay. Just keep those deep breaths going." Theo leaned into the palms against her face. She knew that touch. Medics lifted her onto the gurney, secured her, and readied her for transport. All the while, warm hands cradled Theo's head. Theo's heartbeat blasted inside her ears as the gurney began to roll. Panicking, she white-knuckled the gurney's cold steel sides. "Theo?" The voice called from the distance. "Theo, I'm right here with you, love." Theo's eyelids fluttered, cracked open to the chaos. Everything floated past her as they rolled towards the exit. But she looked up in time to see Bree's tear-filled eyes, hazel and flecked with starbursts of gold, staring down at her. Thank you.
Hello, I'm David S. Peterson from Arizona, and I'm going to be reading an abridged scene from Murder at the Oasis, a Detective Mason Adler mystery, set in Palm Springs in 1946. Mason and Walter stood at the side of the resort pool, watching the corpse, covered by a plain bedsheet, being carried away on a stretcher by two rather attractive young men in starched white uniforms. Walter lit up a Camel, inhaled, and blew out a cloud of smoke as they passed. My, you boys are strong. I get winded just lifting my martini, and it's so beastly hot. May I get you two a cool drink? I have vodka in my room, and there's ice in the machine. The man at the rear shook his head. No, thank you, sir. Walter, Mason said under his breath. Walter gazed up at Mason as he took another puff, and the men moved on. What? I was just trying to be considerate. It's so easy to become overheated and dehydrated in the desert, you know, especially when they're wearing all those clothes. I don't think offering them a cocktail while they're carrying a corpse is being considerate or appropriate, sweating or not. Well, I was just trying to make light of the situation. You were flirting with two attractive young men as they carried a dead body away. You never stop. Well, I don't plan to until I'm the one that's being carried out, hopefully by those two. Besides, you seemed awfully friendly with that detective, speaking of flirting. I was just answering his questions. And you gave him your phone number in Phoenix, just in case he needs to reach me after we've gone back home. He asked me for it. He didn't want mine. He knows he can reach you through me. I'm apparently not his type, but I noticed he's yours. What type would that be? Old. He's at least in his mid-50s. Gray, thinning hair, toothbrush mustache, and blue eyes. His eyes are green. You two were quite chatty. We're discussing a death, Walter. He's investigating and was asking me questions. That's all. Well, I seem to recall you telling me you're not in the market for a man, and even if you were, you wouldn't go looking for one in Palm Springs because it's a 5-hour drive. I'm not in the market for a man, but I guess it never hurts to browse. Walter took another long drag on his cigarette. Sometimes when you browse, you buy, you know. When you find something just too good to pass up, you can't afford to buy. Well, just rent him then, darling. Ugh. It's all so dreadful. Well, not you and the detective, though that rather turns my stomach, too. Gee, thanks. Well, it's true, the way you two were fawning over each other. But by dreadful, I mean this whole thing. 2 dead bodies in 2 days, both here at the Oasis Inn. Ugh. Well, I agree. It's not exactly my idea of a vacation. Oh, bother. It's not mine either, you know. You act like I planned all this, like it was all my idea. This was all your idea, Walter. Well, I suppose that's true if you want to nitpick. I do. All right, fine, but I certainly didn't plan on 2 dead bodies. And don't give me that look and don't scowl. It's bad for your skin. You don't need any more lines and creases in your face. Then stop giving me a reason to scowl. You know, if it wasn't for these dead people, you'd be thanking me for all the fun you had. That's debatable. Oh, pish posh. We were having a swell time before the first corpse turned up. And now there's been a second. It's all just so puzzling. And we're supposed to head home today. Well, good riddance to all of it, I say. I can't wait to get back and leave this behind. I know, but still what? Walter took one more drag on the cigarette and then ground it out beneath his sandaled foot. You should use an ashtray. Oh, Marvin will clean that up, I'm sure. There's no ashtray inside, so what would you have me do? Eat it? I'd like to see that. Well, I'm sure you would. You're just beastly to me sometimes, you know. Only when you deserve it. Well, maybe I need a spanking. Oh no, you'd enjoy that too much. Thank you, and look for my 13th book, A Marvelous Murder, coming out in June 2025.
today from Central North Carolina. I am so honored to be able to share with you an excerpt from my debut novel, Vines and Fire. It is the first in the Goddess of the Trees series. It is a cozy fantasy with romantic subplots. And here we go. They walked farther into the forest, and eventually they came to their destination, the hedge. Madeline examined it. It was taller than ever and wrapped with tangles of thorns. She pulled the pack from her back and withdrew the letter she had written for Beatrice. She did this every time she came to the hedge, praying that one day her words would make it through the green wall, even if she couldn't. Tucking them into the roots, Madeline whispered, "Please, get this to her. I mean her no harm." She understood the possibility that the words had slipped through, and Beatrice remained unforgiving. Glancing back at Gwen, she insisted, "Do not follow me," and began to climb. She ascended around 7 feet without incident, but without warning, the hedge began to writhe. The green, snaking vines pulled Madeline from her hold on the branches and held her in the air before lifting her higher and hurling her to the ground, where she landed. Sickening cracks and excruciating pain stabbed through Madeline as various bones in her body snapped, bringing a wave of nausea over her. But before she could be sick, daylight faded into darkness. A vision, a message, a warning, something formed in her mind as she lay unconscious. For the first time in 20 years, Madeline saw her daughter. Her face was tilted downward, but she recognized the deep chestnut curls now highlighted with silver. Beatrice kneeled over a body, and vines flowed from her hands around the limbs and deep into the mouth. Madeline ran toward the scene and realized it was Gwen, her Gwen, laying before her daughter, who was killing her. Fire and the sizzle of heat and vines flooded Madeline's vision, and the fire was losing. "Madeline!" Gwen's voice sounded so distant. "Madeline!" Madeline's body throbbed as she felt her breath return to her. She moaned and rolled to her side, her vision blurred. The deep, quiet unconscious beckoned her, and she closed her eyes again. Golden shimmers moved within and around Madeline, mending muscles, knitting bones, and relieving bruises. When she opened her eyes again, her vision was clear. "We have to go," she cried as she bolted upright. "Now!" Standing brought a brief lightheadedness, but after a breath, Madeline had her hand on Gwen's elbow, urging her to move. "You can't be here, Gwen," Madeline panted. The women ran over rocks and tree roots as fast as their feet would carry them. They scaled down the rock at the edge of the mountain, and at the bottom, Gwen's eyes probed Madeline's. "We need to keep going." Madeline led Gwen across the road, and her hands shook as she withdrew the keys to the rental car from her pocket and threw them to Gwen. "You drive," she instructed as she removed her pack, threw it in the back seat, and jumped into the passenger side. "Some of our things are still in the hotel, Madeline." "They don't matter," Madeline said. "Maddie," Gwen started. "Go," she insisted. "Madeline," Gwen tried again, her voice calm but firm. "I want to get my things from the room." "Of course." Madeline shook her head as if it would stop the panic. "I'll stand watch out here. Will you get my things as well?" Gwen nodded. Within 5 minutes, she spun the car out of the driveway of the hotel. Half an hour passed in silence. Then Gwen started to cry. "I thought you were dead, Madeline. Your life is terrifying." Madeline watched Gwen's throat bob. "What did you see when you fell?" "She's going to kill you. If she ever gets the opportunity to be around you, she's going to kill you." "Who?" "Beatrice." Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ReadOUT Festival. I thank you for taking the time to watch my recording for my reading for my newest novel, The Blessed. It's a paranormal fantasy novel, and I will be reading a part where the characters are going to visit gods to get approval for our two main characters to become the priestess and the protector that they are destined to be. And this particular god, Ogun, is the god of war and battle, and has to approve the protector's role, which is the role that Layla, our main character, is to Suri, our other main character. So this is their visiting Ogun in order to get his approval. Now standing before Ogun's door with a bruised and battered ego, knowing that his acceptance would be the one to make or break whether Layla would continue as Suri's protector was almost too much. Layla, I'm sure you figured out by now that this introduction is mostly for your benefit. I and every other protector before me had to go through this same introduction you're about to experience. Ogun is not one for sarcasm, jokes, or unnecessary speech. He's direct and prefers responses to his questions to be direct and honest. Despite what you might think the other Orisha believe you are, you've proven your worth by withstanding their treatment with quiet respect. I'm sure Ogun has seen that. Layla was surprised to hear the admiration in Robert's tone. That honesty meant more to her than anything Ogun could say or do, as Robert's shoes were the ones she would be filling, and he was the closest family Suri had. Thank you. They crossed the threshold through a wall of heat into a smithy where a forge burned brightly, and the sound of metal upon metal rang in their ears. Standing at the forge was a man not much taller than Robert, but was twice as broad in the shoulders, chest, and arms. His harshly plain face, muscular torso were covered in black tribal markings and glistened with sweat from the heat of the forge, where he was slamming a massive hammer down on a piece of metal. He wore a skirt made of blue fabric and leather strips, leather sandals, metal bands on his wrists and biceps, and a strip of leather holding his locks, which were laced with cowrie shells and black and green beads, away from his face. Layla could withstand a lot. She was, after all, the child of a demon. But being in this enclosed space, so close to the heat of the forge, was almost unbearable. She glanced over to see sweat pouring from Suri's and Robert's faces, but they seemed to be withstanding it as well. They all knelt, and despite Ogun standing before them, Robert still recited the summoning prayer, then had Layla bring the offering tray forward, reciting her own greeting. By the hammer and the anvil I greet you, Ogun. Forge my will, as you forge iron. What makes you worthy of being our guardian's protector, child of Isfet and Ruth? Ogun asked without looking away from his task as he set the metal he'd been hammering back into the fire. His voice was deep and gruff, like someone who spoke little. I am strong, my mind and abilities. I have worked very hard to stand on the path of light and have dedicated my life to using my abilities to help our people in their times of need. I promise to devote that same dedication in protecting our guardian. Ogun lifted the metal out of the fire and turned to place it in a vat of water. Steam hissed and the dry heat in the room turned to a thick humidity that made Suri gasp and begin to hyperventilate. Without looking away from Ogun, Layla reached the hand back toward her, felt the tight grip of Suri's hand in return. Breathe slow and steady breaths, she told her wordlessly. As the steam cleared and Suri's breathing slowed, she gave Layla's hand a squeeze to let her know she was fine and released her. Strength and ability are all well and good, but that is not what makes one worthy of protecting our guardian. To be a protector, one must be ready to sacrifice one's life for our guardian. Maybe you need a moment to rethink your answer. He pulled the metal piece he'd been working on out of the water, placed it in a vise, and brought out carving and sharpening tools. As he worked, Layla racked her brain for the answer he could be looking for. She knew the longer it took, the more Suri and Robert would have to suffer the heat of the forge. She had begun to care too deeply for Suri to make her suffer for her failing. She understood the role of being Suri's protector called for, and she couldn't think of a better protector in a situation than one that could traverse between planes, like her. What more did these high and mighty beings want from her? She gazed up at Ogun in annoyance as he continued to ignore them as he hammered, chiseled, and sharpened whatever he was creating. Once he was finished, he finally turned to face them, his dark eyes piercing Layla's. Robert, what makes the Guardian's protector worthy of their role? Although the question was directed at Robert, he held Layla's gaze. Dedication and love for the Guardian we are duty-bound to protect at all costs. We must be willing to lay down our lives to keep our Guardian safe from those out to do evil or harm. I ask you once again, Layla, what makes you worthy of being Suri's protector? Layla finally realized from what Robert said and the softening tone of Ogun's voice the answer he was looking for. My guardian and I share a bond that goes beyond simple devotion and dedication. As long as there is breath in my body, so there shall be in my guardian's. If the day comes when I must lay down my life in defense of my guardian, I will do so without hesitation, for my guardian's life far outweighs mine. My heart and soul belong to my guardian, and so shall be used in whatever capacity my guardian requires. Ogun smiled for the first time since they entered the smithy. The fates have chosen well with this one. Rise and stand before me, Protector Layla. Layla hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until it came out in a whoosh of air as she stood, then stepped forward. Thank you. The Blessed. Out now.
My name is Lisbeth Ocasio-Ruse, and I'm a Puerto Rican author and assistant professor of creative writing from Southern New Hampshire University. I will be reading an excerpt from my short story, Gassed and Drag, which is from my fictional collection titled Lover Bar. Pinky and Valeria stumble down the cobblestone road, their 4-inch stilettos catching in the spaces between the aging bricks. Luckily, the jumble of people around them serve as a constant balance post. They're more like sardines than women in the overcrowded can that was Old San Juan that evening. Pinky is used to wigs and heat, but this is otherworldly. Her black wig creates more sweat than usual, but the look is worth it. Usually, she'd be sporting the wig and stilettos in an air-conditioned club for a badass performance laced with intense, yet subtle, socio-political commentary. But now she's bringing the act to the streets because, well, honestly, there's no other choice. Not for Pinky. A year ago, Pinky found out how negligent Puerto Rican politicians were during hurricane relief. Now she finds out the governor, Jay Navarro, is not just corrupt, but a total dick. The homophobic comments were all Pinky needed to join the coup against him. The fact that he mocked the deaths resulting from Hurricane Maria, accused all women of being whores, and admitted to corrupt behavior only fueled her fire. Pinky decides to attend the protest against the governor in drag, despite the potential harassment that inevitably comes with going out in drag on a heavily hetero island. She's proud of her look, ruby red lipstick, a black t-shirt that says Una sola estrella, and a sign that proclaims always a whore, never a thief. The crowd is agreeable enough as Pinky and Valeria make their way to the front of the protest. No pushing, no shoving. Siempre puta, nunca pilla, siempre puta, nunca pilla, Pinky and Valeria chant, their fists held high as they march. The people playing instruments and chanting create a high and cohesive energy. Banderos and cowbells help keep the beat while guidos and sticks grind and strike. Pinky forgets about the uneven footing and begins flowing with the music. They get to the front of the protest where the barricade is, with the people on one side and the police on the other. The Policía of Puerto Rico stands statuesque in their riot gear as the people chant on with fury and musical instruments. A few empty water bottles and straws flutter over the barricade and onto the cops. The cops ignore the first few, but get more and more jittery as the trash continues to fly. Siempre puta nunca pilla, siempre puta nunca pilla, Navarro renuncia. The people around them join in the chanting. Goosebumps rise on Pinky's sweaty skin as she notices the small but powerful following they accrued. A smile stretches across her face unconsciously, but it's quickly erased by a shove that hurls her forward a few inches. You okay? Valeria asks. Pinky shrugs it off. Yeah, I'm fine. Pinky and Valeria continue to chant. Another shove sends both Pinky and Valeria forward, forcing them into the barricades, separating them from La Policía. The policemen directly in front of them flinch. Then, all the policemen lined up behind the barricade tense up. Pinky catches herself on one of the orange dividers, and Valeria does too, but not quite as successfully. Her forearm caught the edge of it forcefully. It will certainly leave a bruise. Okay, Valeria says, you need to take your heels off because this is about to get real. Pinky takes notice of the cops starting to change their stances from neutral to combat ready. She removes her heels and slips on the sneakers she has tucked away in her backpack. The moment she shoves her heels into the bag, the crowd crashes into her like a wave on a desperate surfer. Before she knows what's happening, someone, she assumes Valeria, grabs her arms and pulls her out of the onslaught and into the mass of panicked people rushing from the expanding cloud of tear gas. It's not long before the tear gas reaches them. The fog makes it impossible to keep sight of Valeria. Pinky struggles to hold on to Valeria's hand as the crowd pushes and pulls, threatening to break her grip. That grip is all keeping her and Valeria together. If she loses it, damn. Pinky's lost in the yellow limbo, stumbling downhill, trying not to fall on the cobblestone. The loss of sight, The screaming and the constant physical battery, in addition to the panic and fear of being alone and in danger, have her operating on instinct. Valeria, Valeria, Pinky cries, though she doesn't know why. How can anyone hear her in this madness?